Claire Whitmore recalls her 16th birthday not with cake and candles, but with her father handing her a calculator and demanding 30% of her bakery paycheck for family expenses. The words settled into her like a weight she could not push away. In that instant, the dream she had carried of being celebrated and seen evaporated. Instead, she faced the cold arithmetic of obligation. It was not the first time her family had reminded her that she existed to serve their needs, but it was the first time the betrayal wore such a practical mask. Years later, the memory would rise again when she found herself staring at official documents stamped with the seal of a county court. For now, the chapter of her life unfolding was one of awakening, though she could not yet name it. Claire's journey in this moment was to learn the depth of favoritism, to sense the sharp edges of betrayal in the home where she should have felt safest. She would carry these impressions into every future battle, including the one that would one day put her against her own parents in a courtroom. The Whitmore house in Riverton, Illinois, carried the worn smell of a place lived in too long without repair. The kitchen table was perpetually cluttered with envelopes, gas bills, mortgage reminders, and glossy advertisements no one read. A pot of coffee, long gone bitter, sat cooling on the counter. The evening light came through thin curtains, dust catching like sparks in the beam. It should have been cozy. Instead, it felt suffocating. Richard Hale sat at the head of the table, pen tapping against the calculator he had set in front of Claire. His face carried the air of someone who believed discipline was love, though what it resembled more closely was domination. Margaret Hale folded laundry nearby, her mouth tightening whenever Claire spoke, as though her daughter's voice was an irritation. In the next room, Sophie's piano scales floated through the air, notes halting and uneven but praised as brilliance by their mother. Claire, newly 16, clutched her paycheck envelope like a prize. She had walked each day to the bakery, learned the rhythm of kneading dough and greeting customers, and felt pride in earning her first real wage. But her father's voice severed the ribbon of joy. 30%, he said flatly, sliding the calculator toward her. That's for rent, food, and utilities. It's time you contribute to this household. She blinked at him. But I thought I could start saving for college. College? Margaret let out a laugh that cut more deeply than any slap. Be realistic, Claire. With your grades, you'd be better off learning a trade. Besides, your sister will need a college fund. She has a real future ahead of her. Claire tried to protest, but Richard's eyes narrowed. This is not a debate. 30%. Every week. Her cheeks burned, yet she handed over the bills, her fingers reluctant to let go. Upstairs later, she unfolded the thin slips of cash left to her and wondered how many hours she would need to work just to buy school supplies. Beneath her frustration, something deeper formed. The awareness that in this family, love was measured not by care but by contribution. That night, when she rose for water, she heard her parents speaking in hushed tones. She lingered in the hallway, listening. "Don't expect much from Claire," Richard murmured. "She'll never be more than average." "She's responsible, though," Margaret replied. "At least she can shoulder part of the bills. Sophie's the one we need to invest in. That girl is special." The words lodged like splinters in Claire's chest. She pressed her forehead against the cool wall, trying not to cry, though the tears came anyway. Upstairs, Sophie's laughter rang out, carefree and bright, as she practiced the piano piece her mother had praised earlier that day. In her room, Claire sat at the edge of her twin bed, staring at the peeling wallpaper she had lived with since childhood. She traced the fading patterns with her fingertip, imagining a different life. Outside her window, the quiet Illinois neighborhood settled into night. Porch lights flickered on, and she could see the faint outline of the neighbor's flag moving in the breeze. She thought of how ordinary everything appeared from the outside, while inside her own home, the balance of affection and fairness was already broken beyond repair. She lay down, unable to sleep. In the silence, her father's pen tapping, her mother's dismissive laugh, and her sister's piano blended into one haunting chorus. It told her plainly, she was not the daughter they cherished. She was the daughter they used. Her thoughts rose in rebellion, soft at first, then sharper. One day, I'll prove them all wrong. She stared out the window into the dark street, vowing in the quiet that she would not remain defined by their dismissals. Claire looked out her bedroom window that night and vowed silently, one day, I'll prove them all wrong. Years later, Claire stood in her tiny dorm room, unpacking secondhand sheets alone, her parents too busy to drive her to college. The air smelled faintly of dust and paint from the old walls, and the mattress springs groaned under her as she spread out the thrifted bedding. Across the hall, other families bustled with boxes, laughter, and well wishes. Her roommate arrived with her parents in tow, arms full of matching bedspreads, lamps, and framed photographs. Claire kept her eyes lowered as their joy spilled across the hallway. This moment should have been a new beginning, yet it felt eerily familiar. From the time she was 16, she had carried the weight of adult responsibility, and now, in her first steps toward independence, the absence of her parents told her once more that she would have to navigate life alone. She knew in her bones this was not the last time they would remind her that she was disposable in their world. Her goal was clear. She needed to survive here, to prove she could endure the burden of studies and work without support. She wanted freedom, but she also wanted dignity. The lessons she learned at home had sharpened her resolve. If she had no family cheering her on, she would find new allies in unexpected places. The setting of the university campus was both daunting and thrilling. Autumn leaves scattered across the quad as students laughed in small groups, already making friends. The cafeteria buzzed with chatter, trays clattering as students lined up for meals. Claire's world, however, was narrower. Her dorm with its single lamp and scratched desk, the part-time job she secured at a restaurant downtown, and the quiet library where she studied until her eyes blurred. It was not glamorous, but it was hers. Claire was not truly alone. Naomi Brooks, her new roommate, was also a scholarship student. Naomi's family had been supportive but had little to give financially. They bonded quickly over late-night coffee and whispered confessions of exhaustion. "My parents help where they can," Naomi admitted one night. "But with 5 kids at home, I am the first to try college. I guess I'm the experiment." Claire had smiled faintly, thinking how much even that small amount of support was worth. For her, there were no encouraging phone calls, no safety nets. Her parents did call, but the conversations were filled with the same tone she knew too well. "Sophie's ballet costume is over $300, Margaret reminded her once, as if Claire's minimum wage shifts could bear the cost. Claire listened quietly, then wired $200, cutting into her grocery budget. She lived for a week on little more than cup noodles, her stomach nodding not just from hunger, but from the gnawing knowledge that her sacrifice went unnoticed. At her job, she carried trays of steaming plates through the noisy restaurant, smiling at customers while exhaustion tugged at her shoulders. Between shifts and classes, she studied late into the night, her desk lamp glowing until dawn. When she faltered, Naomi was there. "You're starving yourself so Sophie can dance," she said bluntly one evening when she caught Claire skipping another meal. "Don't you see what they're doing to you?" Claire had no answer. She knew, but she could not bear to speak it aloud. A turning point came when she met Daniel Mercer, the supervisor of a financial internship program. He noticed her diligence and precision when she worked as a teaching assistant for an introductory business course. Daniel, older and thoughtful, pulled her aside after class. "You remind me of myself at your age," he said. "If you can handle the work, I'd like to recommend you for our summer internship." The words filled her with both excitement and fear. At last, here was someone who saw value in her determination, not as a source of income, but as a mind worth investing in. Still, the shadows of her family remained. One night, as she calculated her budget by hand, Her phone buzzed with a new message from her mother. "Call us. It's about Sophie's future." Her chest tightened. She knew what it meant. No congratulations on the internship acceptance she had received that morning. No interest in her grades or survival. The request would be the same. Another sacrifice. Another withdrawal from her spirit. She glanced at Naomi, who watched her with quiet concern, and whispered, "They'll never stop asking." Claire receives her internship acceptance letter, her first real chance at independence, but her phone buzzes with a new message from her mother. "Call us. It's about Sophie's future." Claire stood in the empty living room of her first house, keys trembling in her hand, the proudest moment of her life, shadowed by dread of her parents' reaction. The walls were bare, the hardwood floors scuffed from years of wear, but to her it was nothing short of miraculous. This bungalow in Riverton was modest, yes, but it was hers, purchased with years of discipline and sacrifice. She pressed her palm against the cool plaster wall, breathing in the quiet, knowing that every late-night study session, every missed social gathering, every skipped meal had led her here. Yet beneath her pride pulsed unease, because she knew her family would not see it as a triumph, but as an insult. She had carried that dread since her teenage years, when her wages were siphoned into her parents' budget under the guise of necessity. Now, as a homeowner, she anticipated a new kind of demand, one dressed up in entitlement and guilt. Thanksgiving was approaching, and against her better judgment, she invited them to see the house. Perhaps, she thought, standing in the doorway with trembling fingers, they might find a sliver of pride in her. Perhaps the sight of her accomplishment would soften what years of obligation and neglect had hardened. The setting was simple. A small bungalow on a quiet street with leafless trees bending in the November wind. Inside, the dining table she had purchased secondhand gleamed with polish. A roast turkey rested at the center, steam rising into the air, surrounded by bowls of mashed potatoes, green beans, and cornbread. She had dressed the table carefully, not in extravagance but in care, hoping to create warmth. Outside, the Illinois afternoon chilled the air, but inside she lit candles to chase away the gloom. Richard and Margaret Hale arrived first, their eyes sharp as they stepped inside. Richard glanced around with a critical eye. "It's small," he said, his voice flat, as though announcing a fact. Claire forced a smile. "Perfect size for me." Margaret's lips tightened as she walked through the rooms, touching the surfaces as if searching for flaws. "This neighborhood isn't very upscale, is it?" she asked. Claire steadied her voice. "It's safe. It's close to work." Sophie arrived later, wrapped in a thick scarf, her face lighting with genuine admiration. "I think it's awesome, Claire. You worked so hard for this." They gathered at the table, and for a few moments, there was ordinary chatter about the neighborhood and Claire's commute. But the conversation shifted when Margaret set down her fork, her tone laced with purpose. "Sophie has some news." Sophie looked down at her plate, fingers twisting the napkin. "I might have to take a break from school next semester," she murmured. Claire's heart lurched. "Why?" Sophie's voice cracked as she explained. Her scholarship had not been renewed. A loan application had been denied because of Richard's credit. Margaret leaned forward, her eyes narrowing. "We thought, given your new purchase, you must be in a very comfortable position now." Claire gripped the edge of the table. "I just bought a house. I'm not exactly flush with cash." Richard's jaw tightened. "Surely you have savings left. Or you could take out a home equity loan." The words struck like a slap. "You're asking me to borrow against my house? I used everything I had for the down payment." Margaret's voice rose, sharp as glass. "So you're just going to let your sister drop out of college after all we've done for you?" Claire's composure cracked. "What exactly have you done for me? I've been working since I was 16. I paid for my education. I bought this house on my own." Richard's face darkened. "We raised you. We put a roof over your head." Claire's voice trembled, but did not break. "A roof I paid rent for as a teenager." The table fell into tense silence before erupting again in accusations. Margaret accused her of jealousy, of punishing Sophie for her talent. Richard thundered about family duty. Sophie's eyes filled with tears as she whispered, "Please stop fighting. I'll figure something out. I'll take a semester off and work." Margaret snapped, "Absolutely not. You're not throwing away your future because your sister is too selfish to help." Claire turned to Sophie, her voice softening. "I can help you look at scholarships, work-study programs. There are other ways." Richard's hand slammed down on the table, rattling the silverware. "The only alternative is for you to step up and do the right thing. Family takes care of family." Claire's patience splintered. "I have been taking care of this family since I was a teenager. I am done being your ATM." Richard rose, his face red with fury. Margaret's voice cut the air. "That house should be securing Sophie's future, not sitting here as a monument to your selfishness." The words pierced her, not because they held truth, but because they revealed exactly how little her parents valued her struggle. Sophie sat frozen, whispering again, "I never wanted this." But her voice was drowned out by the storm around her. As the plates cooled and the candles guttered low, the warmth Claire had tried to build collapsed into cold ashes. The visit ended with slammed doors and silence. Claire lingered at the doorway after they left, the wind sweeping leaves across the porch. She wanted to believe it was another argument, ugly but temporary. Yet something in her father's last words clung to her like a warning. His voice still echoed in her mind as she locked the door and leaned against it, exhausted. Weeks later, Claire opened her mailbox. Inside lay an envelope stamped with the seal of the county court. Her hands shook as she tore it open, reading the words that would alter everything. Plaintiffs, Richard and Margaret Hale. Claire sat on her living room floor, surrounded by scattered court papers. Her parents had officially filed to seize 70% of her home. The words on the page seemed almost unreal, their legal phrasing cold and detached, but the message was unmistakable. Richard and Margaret Hale had turned parenthood into litigation. What should have been the safest bond was now weaponized, her own family dragging her into court for the crime of building a life independent of them. This betrayal did not fall from the sky. She had felt its shadow for years. The calculator on her 16th birthday, the cold phone calls asking for Sophie's expenses, the Thanksgiving confrontation, each moment had been a foreshadowing of this larger assault. Still, the cruelty of seeing her parents' names as plaintiffs against her cut more deeply than she could have prepared for. She realized now that they would not stop at guilt or emotional pressure. They would use every tool they could, even the law, to bind her back into servitude. The chapter of her life before her had one goal: to survive this legal ambush and protect what she had built. It was not only about defending her house, it was about defending her dignity, her right to boundaries, and her belief that she was not born to be consumed by her parents' demands. The bungalow felt colder that night than it had in weeks. Outside, November winds howled against the windows, rattling the frames. Inside, Claire sat with the lawsuit papers spread across the rug, a half-drunk mug of tea cooling beside her. The walls that once seemed like symbols of security now felt like potential ruins. She stared at the official seal, her chest tight, until her phone vibrated. Naomi Brooks' voice filled the line minutes later, steady and urgent. Within half an hour, Naomi was at her door, carrying a bottle of wine. "They can't do this, Claire," Naomi said, skimming the pages with sharp eyes. "This isn't just unfair, it's insane." Claire shook her head, her voice breaking. "They found a way to make me the villain for having a roof over my head." Naomi pulled her into an embrace. "Then we fight." The next morning, Claire sat across from attorney Linda Cohen in a quiet, warmly lit office. Shelves of legal texts lined the walls, and framed photographs of smiling children and grandchildren reminded Claire of the family she longed for, but never had. Linda's voice was calm as she explained the reality. Their case has virtually no legal merit, she assured. Parents do not have the right to seize their adult child's property because of some implied family obligation. Claire released a shaky breath, but Linda's expression grew serious. However, even baseless suits must be defended. This will cost time, money, and no small amount of emotional strain. Claire nodded, her fingers gripping the edge of the chair. I can't let them take this house. It represents everything I fought for. Later that week, Daniel Mercer invited her into his office at Summit Financial Group. The blinds filtered soft afternoon light as he gestured for her to sit. You've been distracted lately, he said gently. Claire hesitated before telling him the truth. His eyes widened as she finished. Amanda, what your parents are doing is not normal. It's exploitative. Hearing it spoken aloud by someone she respected nearly unraveled her, but it also strengthened her resolve. Nights were the hardest. Claire lay awake, imagining a judge ordering her to hand over her keys, picturing her belongings stacked on the curb. Each creak of the house made her stomach twist, as though her security were already dissolving. Yet she gathered documents, tax returns proving she had been independent since 18s, bank records showing the transfers she had already sent her family, letters of recommendation from mentors who could attest to her discipline. Each paper felt like both evidence and armor. Her father's voice over the phone one evening confirmed her deepest fear. You refused to help Sophie voluntarily, so we're pursuing legal means. This is about fairness. Claire gripped the receiver until her knuckles whitened. This will destroy whatever's left of our relationship. His reply chilled her. That is your choice, Claire. Do the right thing, and we can put this behind us. The words stayed with her long after the call ended. For Richard and Margaret, love had never been unconditional. It had always been transactional. Now, the transaction had reached its most grotesque form, suing their own daughter. Naomi sat with her late one night, papers scattered between them on the coffee table. They'll twist the story, Claire. They'll make it sound like you abandoned them, like you turned your back on Sophie. Claire rubbed her temples, exhausted. Then I'll show the truth, that I've been the one holding them up all these years. Naomi leaned forward, her voice firm. And this time, you can't give in. This time, you have to win. For the first time in years, Claire felt a flicker of something close to defiance, not the quiet endurance she had lived on for so long. She understood now that protecting herself was not selfishness, but survival. Claire realized that her parents didn't want reconciliation, they wanted her property, her sacrifice, her submission. Linda placed her hand on the lawsuit file and said, Claire, prepare yourself. They'll try to destroy you in court. The county courtroom was hushed as Judge Harriet Wilson called the case of Hale versus Whitmore. Claire sat at the defendant's table, her palms damp, her heart thudding against her ribs as she locked eyes with her parents across the aisle. Richard and Margaret Hale appeared composed, even self-righteous, as though they had every reason to stand here today. For Claire, the room felt like a foreign stage, a place where the ugliest corners of her family's life would now be performed for strangers. The echo of her father's voice still haunted her. If you won't pay willingly, we'll make sure you do. She had dismissed it as bluster, a bluff meant to frighten her. Now, seated beneath the high ceiling and fluorescent lights, she saw how serious he had been. The betrayal cut deeper than any earlier slight. What had once been a private wound had transformed into a public spectacle. Her goal today was simple yet monumental, to protect not only her house, but also the truth of her life. This battle was no longer about Sophie's tuition or her parents' disappointment. It was about survival, financial, emotional, and moral. She needed to prove that their claim of family obligation was nothing more than greed disguised as virtue. The setting itself carried weight. The county courthouse, with its stone walls and polished oak benches, exuded authority. The scent of paper and dust lingered in the air, The quiet creak of the wooden seats, the whisper of shuffling papers, the occasional cough-all reminded Claire that her most private scars were about to be examined under the cold scrutiny of the law. At the plaintiff's table, Richard sat rigid, his jaw set in defiance. Margaret's expression was one of theatrical hurt, her eyes carefully avoiding her elder daughter's gaze. Sophie, in contrast, looked nervous, her hands folded tightly in her lap as though she wished she could disappear. Linda Cohen, steady at Claire's side, organized her folders with precision, occasionally leaning toward Claire with brief words of reassurance. The proceedings began. Richard and Margaret's lawyer rose, his voice clipped and rehearsed. He painted a portrait of Claire as the ungrateful child who had benefited from her parents' sacrifices, only to abandon her family when her sister needed her most. My clients believe their daughter has a moral and financial obligation to support her younger sister's education, he declared. The purchase of a house, while Sophie faces the prospect of leaving college, demonstrates a profound neglect of familial duty. Claire's stomach tightened, but Linda rose calmly, her presence commanding without force. Your Honor, she began, her voice clear, moral obligations and legal obligations are not the same. Parents have a legal duty to provide for their minor children. Children do not owe their parents or siblings repayment for that care in adulthood. Miss Whitmore has been financially independent since she was 18, paying her way through college, supporting herself, and even providing her family with over $15,000 in voluntary contributions. The claim before you is not only without merit, it is a misuse of this court's time. Judge Wilson's brow furrowed as she looked down at the documents before her. Mr. and Mrs. Hale, she said, her tone firm, did you contribute financially to Sophie's college fund? Richard shifted uncomfortably. We expected scholarships would cover most of it. Sophie is very talented. The judge's gaze sharpened. Did you make the same expectation for your elder daughter? Margaret lifted her chin, dismissive. Claire was always independent. She made her own way. The words rang through the courtroom, louder in Claire's ears than any gavel. She clenched her fists, biting back the urge to respond, but Linda's hand on her arm reminded her to let the evidence speak. Linda presented tax returns, bank statements, and letters showing Claire had never been a financial burden since high school. Far from taking from her family, Linda said, Miss Whitmore has contributed generously for years, money she was under no obligation to give. This suit, Your Honor, is not about obligation. It is about exploitation. As the arguments twisted and collided, the weight of years of neglect pressed against Claire's chest. Every accusation her parents flung selfish, jealous, ungrateful, stabbed at old wounds. She tried to focus on the documents in front of her, but her father's glare seared through her composure. It was as if he wanted to break her, not just financially but in spirit. Then, in the middle of the proceedings, Sophie rose unexpectedly. Her chair scraped against the floor, drawing startled glances from the courtroom. Your Honor, she said, her voice trembling. May I speak? The judge considered, then nodded. Go ahead. Sophie clasped her hands tightly, her knuckles white. I never asked for this lawsuit. I never wanted my sister to pay for my education this way. Claire has always helped me, taught me how to budget. She helped me apply for scholarships. I don't want her house. I don't want her to suffer because of me. Margaret gasped, a sharp sound that carried across the room. Sophie, she hissed, but the judge silenced her with a glance. Richard's face turned red, his jaw working furiously as though he might explode. Claire's throat tightened as she looked at her sister. For years, she had believed Sophie was only a pawn in their parents' favoritism. Now she saw in her younger sister's trembling frame a kind of courage she had not expected. The judge leaned back in her chair, eyes moving slowly across the courtroom. I've heard enough, she announced. I will deliver my ruling after recess. Judge Wilson bangs her gavel and announces, I've heard enough. I will deliver my ruling after recess. The courtroom held its breath as Judge Wilson returned, papers in hand, ready to decide the fate of a family torn apart by greed. The rustle of her robe echoed in the silence, every step deliberate as she ascended to the bench. Claire sat rigid, her hands clasped tightly in her lap, feeling as though her entire life was balanced on the judge's next words. She had braced herself for this moment since the day she opened her mailbox to find the lawsuit. Now the final judgment stood between her and either ruin or freedom. She remembered nights in college, counting every dollar of her wages while living on noodles, only to send money home so Sophie could have ballet costumes. Those sacrifices had been invisible to her parents then, and they seemed invisible now. This ruling, she knew, would not only decide the future of her home, but would also declare, in the language of law, what she had always known, that their expectations were nothing more than exploitation dressed as love. The goal in her mind was unshakable: to walk out of this courthouse with her independence intact. Whether her parents ever admitted their cruelty no longer mattered. What mattered was the validation that she did not owe them her life. The courtroom's setting seemed almost sacred now. Wooden pews creaked as townsfolk shifted, unable to hide their curiosity at the family drama unfolding in public. The fluorescent lights buzzed faintly overhead. Through tall windows, the November sky loomed gray, as if even nature were holding its breath. Claire glanced across the aisle. Richard sat stiffly, eyes forward, jaw clenched in fury. Margaret wore the mask of a wounded mother, lips pursed as if she were the victim. Sophie sat behind them, her head bowed, as though the weight of the day pressed too heavily on her shoulders. Judge Wilson's voice broke the silence. Having reviewed all testimony and evidence, I find the plaintiff's claim wholly without merit. Murmurs rippled through the room. There exists no legal foundation for obligating an adult child to finance a sibling's education. Furthermore, the evidence presented clearly demonstrates that Miss Whitmore has provided substantial financial support to her family for years, far beyond any reasonable expectation. Claire's breath caught, a rush of relief flooding her chest. She closed her eyes for a brief moment, feeling the words settle deep within her, not just as a legal victory, but as a release. The judge continued, her voice sharpened with disapproval. "Mr. and Mrs. Hale, this court is deeply troubled by your behavior. You appear to have placed unfair burdens on one daughter while favoring the other, then attempted to coerce her through legal action. This suit borders on frivolous. Accordingly, I am ordering you to pay Miss Whitmore's legal fees." Margaret gasped audibly, her hand flying to her chest. Richard's face darkened to a dangerous red, his eyes blazing at the bench. "This is outrageous," he hissed, but the judge silenced him with a firm rap of her gavel. Claire barely heard their protests. All she could feel was the steady warmth of Naomi's hand gripping hers beneath the table. Linda Cohen leaned in, whispering, "You won." The courtroom emptied slowly after the ruling. Richard stormed out without looking back, Margaret hurrying after him, her heels clicking sharply against the tile. Sophie lingered, hesitant, before making her way to Claire. She stood awkwardly, her voice low. "I'm sorry, Claire. I never wanted this. I told the judge the truth because you didn't deserve any of it." Claire studied her sister's tear-stained face and, for the first time in years, felt a crack in the wall of resentment. "I know," she whispered. "I believe you." In the weeks that followed, life shifted. The bungalow once again became her sanctuary, no longer threatened by legal assault. She painted the walls, planted flowers in the frozen soil that would bloom come spring, and began to fill the house with tokens of her choosing. Framed photos of Naomi, Daniel, and even Sophie, but none of Richard or Margaret. Each change was a declaration that this home belonged to her and her alone. Work at Summit Financial Group grew steadier, and with Daniel's mentorship, Claire advanced in responsibility. She poured herself into her role. But outside of work, she sought something more. At Naomi's urging, She began writing a blog about financial independence, targeted at those who, like her, came from families who drained rather than supported. The response was overwhelming. Messages flooded in from people across the country, children who had been forced to act as parents, siblings who had sacrificed their futures for others, adults estranged from families that had only taken. In their words, Claire found not only solidarity but also healing. One afternoon, months later, she sat in a quiet cafe across from Sophie. The clink of coffee cups and hum of conversation surrounded them. Sophie stirred her drink nervously. "I moved out," she confessed. "I'm staying with a friend until I figure things out. I couldn't stay in that house anymore." Claire nodded slowly, her heart tightening with a mix of sorrow and pride. "It's not easy breaking away," she said. Sophie met her eyes, determination shining through. "I learned it from you." That spring, Claire hosted a small gathering in her home to mark a year since her purchase. Naomi brought a homemade pie, Daniel arrived with a bottle of wine, and Sophie brought her boyfriend, shy but kind. The living room filled with laughter, the walls echoing with warmth rather than accusation. For the first time, Claire felt what family should be: chosen, supportive, free of conditions. Later that night, after the last guest had left and silence settled over the house, Claire stood at her kitchen window. The garden she had planted was just beginning to show green shoots against the fading light. She thought of the courtroom, of the judge's words, of Sophie's trembling confession. The lesson was carved deep. Family is not defined by obligation but by presence, not by demands, but by loyalty. As she touched the window pane, she whispered to herself, "Family isn't who claims you, it's who stands beside you. And for the first time, I know I am free." In the end, Claire's journey was not just about a house, or even about the courtroom victory she earned against her parents. It was about reclaiming the dignity that had been stripped from her since she was a child. She had spent her youth sacrificing, working, and giving until nothing was left for herself. Yet when she finally stood her ground, the world shifted, and she discovered the power of boundaries. Families are supposed to nurture, not consume. Parents are supposed to protect, not exploit. That simple truth had been twisted in her life for so long, but justice finally untangled it. The courtroom did more than dismiss a frivolous lawsuit. It validated her years of silent struggle. For every late-night shift, every lonely bus ride to campus, every dollar she gave away to keep peace in her home, she finally heard a voice of authority say, "You did not owe them this." That verdict was more than legal, it was emotional liberation. Still, the ache remained. Betrayal always leaves scars, especially when it comes from those we love most. Looking at her parents across the courtroom, Claire saw not only their greed, but also the emptiness in their eyes. They had chosen power and control over love, and in doing so, they had lost her. She walked out, knowing the bond between them had been broken long before the gavel fell. Yet out of that brokenness, new bonds emerged. Naomi's steadfast friendship, Daniel's guidance, Ethan's quiet support, and Sophie's eventual courage proved that family can be chosen as much as inherited. In the laughter of friends gathered in her small home, Claire discovered a truth greater than any inheritance or obligation. True family stands beside you, not because they must, but because they choose to. Her story also revealed how favoritism corrodes. By raising one child as the golden hope and the other as the household provider, Richard and Margaret planted seeds of resentment that eventually tore their family apart. Love cannot thrive when it is conditional. It cannot heal when it is measured against sacrifices demanded like debts. Claire's life was proof that children should not be financial assets, but people with dreams and dignity of their own. The philosophy remains: loyalty should be earned through love, not forced through guilt. Claire's resilience is a reminder to anyone listening that standing up for yourself is not selfish, it is necessary. It is the difference between a life dictated by others and a life truly lived. Betrayal is painful, but silence in the face of betrayal is far worse. By speaking up, by fighting back, Claire became the author of her own story. And perhaps the most important lesson is this: justice does not always come in the form of punishment. Sometimes, justice is simply freedom. Freedom to live without fear of manipulation. Freedom to invest in one's own future. Freedom to call the people who stand by you family, even if they do not share your blood. When Claire planted flowers in her garden after the court case, she wasn't just decorating her yard. She was declaring that her life, like those blossoms, would grow on her terms. Her home was no longer just a house, it was a symbol of survival, of defiance, and of hope. For older generations who know too well the sting of betrayal or the burden of expectations, Claire's journey holds special resonance. It reminds us of family dinners where silence covered secrets, of wills that divided siblings, of sacrifices made in the hope of love returned. It speaks to the universal truth that betrayal often comes not from strangers, but from within the walls we thought were safe. But it also offers redemption. Sophie's voice in the courtroom, her whispered, "I never wanted this," showed that cycles can break, that even those raised in the shadow of favoritism can choose honesty, that healing, while never perfect, is possible when truth is spoken. So what can we carry from Claire's story? That betrayal will come, but so will loyalty. That justice, though slow, can arrive when courage is found. And that true family, whether by blood or by choice, is defined not by demands, but by devotion. If you found yourself moved by Claire's battle, if you saw in her struggles an echo of your own, then take her lesson with you. Guard your dignity, set your boundaries, and remember that you are not selfish for protecting your peace. If you like this story, then leave it number 1 in the comments so we know it touched your heart. And don't forget to subscribe to our channel to hear the next story, another tale of betrayal, of justice, of the hidden truths that shape families. Because as Claire learned, sometimes the most powerful story is the one where you finally stand up and say, "Enough."